Imagine for a second that you're the CEO of a local construction company.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. And your dump trucks, they basically never leave the county line.
Super localized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one morning, your head of HR, who, happens to still hold a commercial driver's license from his days in the field like 10 years ago, he decides to do you a favor.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, you're short-staffed.
Yeah.
So he just grabs the keys to a rig to move some equipment across town, and at a stoplight, he accidentally bumps into the back of a minivan.
Not great, but it happens.
Right, no one is hurt. The damage is maybe like $500.
Mm.
So you think, well, we dodged a bullet.
Sure, you handle it internally, pay the bill, and move on.
That's what you think. But 3 weeks later, you were sitting across a metal table from a Department of Transportation auditor.
And they are not happy.
Not at all. They're threatening to revoke your entire company's operating authority, cancel your insurance policies, and basically shut down your business.
All because of a fender bender.
Right. And why? Because you didn't put your HR director into a federal random drug testing pool.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for a fleet manager, honestly.
It really is.
And the truly terrifying part is that this exact thing happens all the time. I mean, people assume they understand the rules because they operate small or they operate locally or they just, rely on standard corporate common sense.
Right, the whole it's just a favor mentality.
Exactly. But standard common sense just does not apply here.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. If you are a commercial trucking manager or an operations director, maybe compliance officer or an owner-operator, this conversation is custom built for you.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to completely decode the foundation of the DOT drug and alcohol testing regulations. We're specifically looking at the source materials covering 49 CFR, Section 382.101, and Section 382.103.
Which is, frankly, the core of everything.
It is. This is your ultimate guide to the why and the who of federal drug testing compliance. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's dive in, because those two specific sections of the code, they are the bedrock.
Right.
Before you start collecting urine samples, before you ever contract with a lab, you have to fundamentally understand the architecture of the law.
You have to know what you're actually building.
Exactly, because if you build your compliance program in a flawed understanding of who is actually covered, the entire structure eventually collapses during an audit.
And the financial and regulatory danger of that collapse is really what we are focusing on today.
Huge financial danger, yeah.
So we are moving past the basic what of the rules and getting into the real mechanisms of how and why they function.
Right.
So let's start with the foundational philosophy of the law itself. Because I think a lot of operations managers, they view the DOT testing program as basically a punitive human resources policy.
Oh, all the time.
Right. It's treated like this corporate trap just to catch rule breakers.
Which is such a fundamental misunderstanding of the text. If you look at 49 CFR 382.101, the explicitly stated purpose of the regulation is to prevent crashes and injuries.
Prevent, right.
Yeah, prevent crashes and injuries associated with alcohol misuse and controlled substance use by commercial motor vehicle drivers. The absolute keyword there is prevention.
It's not about punishing bad behavior after the fact.
No, not at all. This is not an HR policy. It is a physical safety regulation.
It's an active safety mechanism. I like to think about it like air brakes.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right, because on a massive commercial truck, air brakes are a physical fail-safe for the machine. You would literally never tell your mechanic to skip an air brake inspection just because it was inconvenient this quarter.
You'd be out of business in a week.
Exactly. So the DOT testing program is essentially the air brakes for the human being operating the machinery.
Right.
It's a mechanism designed to stop a disaster before the wheels ever start turning.
That is the exact mentality a compliance manager needs to adopt. Treating the testing program merely as a paperwork chore, just a box you check to keep the DOT off your back, that creates massive blind spots.
It really does.
But when you integrate testing into your core safety management system, like right alongside your driver education and your clearinghouse queries, you elevate it.
It becomes part of the culture.
Yes. You realize that keeping an impaired person out of an 80,000-pound tractor trailer or a hazardous materials tanker, it isn't about policing morality, it's about risk mitigation.
But let me challenge that for a second, because if we aren't policing morality, we are still kind of policing human biology, right?
Well, yeah.
We are talking about human beings with private lives. So if the goal is strictly commercial vehicle safety, how does this mandate actually change the way a fleet manager is supposed to approach a driver's weekend habits?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because a lot of managers feel like they are being forced to act as weekend babysitters.
It is a delicate balance for sure, but the regulations actually draw a very distinct line here.
Okay, how so?
Let's look at a real-world scenario from our source material. Take the driver who finishes his route on a Friday evening.
Okay.
He clocks out, goes home, and drinks heavily. There is literally nothing in the federal regulations that prohibits a driver from legally consuming alcohol simply because they hold a commercial driver's license.
Wait, really?
Really, holding a CDL doesn't mean you take a vow of prohibition.
So the DOT just doesn't care what you do on your couch on a Friday night?
They don't. The compliance issue and the safety issue, that only arises when that biological reality intersects with the safety-sensitive restrictions.
The actual time on the clock.
Exactly. The law has very specific restrictions regarding pre-duty alcohol use, on-duty use, and specific breath alcohol concentration levels.
Ah, I see.
The regulation is designed to prevent that Friday night binge from creating a commercial vehicle safety risk on, say, Saturday morning.
So it's all about the metabolic timeline.
Yes, 100%.
The manager isn't policing the Friday night beer. The manager is legally obligated to police the Saturday morning pre-trip condition.
Precisely. And this is where education comes in, you know. A smart manager explains to their fleet that the DOT testing program isn't judging their weekend.
It's strictly enforcing their readiness for duty.
Exactly. But that metabolic timeline you just mentioned, that brings up a massive, potentially career-ending blind spot for a lot of fleets right now.
Oh, especially when we move from alcohol to controlled substances.
Oh, absolutely.
The legal marijuana state dilemma. I mean, this is arguably the most dangerous assumption out there right now for managers.
It's a huge trap.
Let's say you have a driver who lives in a state where recreational marijuana is completely legal.
Which is a lot of states now.
Right. They could just walk into a storefront on a Saturday, show their driver's license, and purchase THC gummies perfectly legally under state law.
And that driver assumes that because they are off duty and because the state governor literally signed it into law, they are perfectly fine to consume it over the weekend.
And as a manager, if you share that assumption, or if you kind of just look the other way because it's state legal, you are walking your company straight off a cliff.
You are. You really are. Because DOT drug testing is governed exclusively by federal transportation regulations.
Federal trumps state.
Always.
Yeah.
And under federal law, marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. It remains squarely on the DOT testing panel right alongside cocaine, amphetamines, PCP, and opioids.
Wow.
Yeah, the federal government does not care about your state's legalization when it comes to operating commercial motor vehicles.
I want to dig into the why on that, though.
Yeah.
Because a driver might argue, and honestly it sounds somewhat logical, they might say, look, if I drink a six-pack on Friday, I'm sober by Monday morning and I pass my breathalyzer.
Right.
If I eat a THC gummy on Friday, I'm also sober by Monday morning, but I fail my urinalysis. Why is the DOT treating them so differently?
It comes down to the biological mechanisms of metabolization.
Okay, get nerdy with it.
Well, alcohol is water-soluble, right? It clears the human system at a relatively predictable, rapid rate.
Makes sense.
But THC is fat-soluble. It binds to the lipids in the body and releases very slowly over weeks.
Over weeks.
Yeah. And currently, we just do not have a universally accepted roadside-ready biological test that can definitively prove acute THC impairment in the exact moment.
Not the way a breathalyzer proves acute alcohol impairment.
Exactly. A urine test just proves that the metabolite is present. It just means the person used it at some point in the recent past.
Okay, so because the DOT can't pinpoint the exact hour you consume the THC, and because it is still federally illegal, they just have to utilize a blanket prohibition.
That is the harsh regulatory reality. The DOT cutoff levels for marijuana metabolites are incredibly strict.
So as a manager, you have to communicate this mercilessly to your fleet.
You can't say it enough.
Federal safety regulations completely supersede state legalization. You just cannot afford to let your drivers assume that state law protects their CDL.
Because it doesn't. If a driver pops positive for THC, they are immediately removed from safety-sensitive functions. Instantly. They are reported to the federal clearinghouse, and your company is left scrambling to replace them.
That is a brutal reality check. So, okay, once a manager truly understands this core philosophy, right, that we are enforcing a strict federal safety mechanism to prevent catastrophic liability.
Right.
The next step is figuring out exactly whose safety falls under their jurisdiction.
The who.
Exactly. Who actually has to take these tests? This introduces what I think is the most common trap for local businesses. Let's talk about applicability under Section 382.103.
Applicability is the most vital concept in your entire program. I mean, if you get this wrong, nothing else matters.
So what's the golden rule?
The overarching rule is that Part 382 applies to persons and the employers of those persons who operate commercial motor vehicles in commerce and who are subject to specified commercial licensing requirements.
Okay, that's the legal speak.
Right, but for the vast majority of U.S. operations, we are talking about vehicles that require a CDL, a commercial driver's license, or a CLP, a commercial learner's permit.
Okay, so the filter seems simple enough. Are they driving a CMV in commerce? And does that specific vehicle require a CDL?
That's the test.
But here's where I want to push back a little, or at least play the role of the skeptical local business owner.
Go for it.
The federal government regulates interstate commerce. Like, that is literally in the Constitution.
True.
So if I own an excavating company and I operate a fleet of heavy dump trucks entirely within the state of Ohio.
Okay, intrastate.
Right. I pick up dirt in Ohio, I dump it in Ohio. My trucks literally never cross a state line. How on earth does Washington, D.C. have the authority to subject my local drivers to a federal drug testing mandate?
It is an incredibly common argument, and honestly, it's why so many intrastate managers think they are basically invisible to the DOT.
It makes logical sense.
It does, but the legal mechanism behind this is fascinating, and it usually involves federal highway funding.
Wait, what, highway funding?
Yes.
Yeah.
The federal government provides these massive grants to states to maintain their highways, right?
Infrastructure money.
But those grants come with strings attached. To receive that federal money, the states must agree to adopt the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, the FMCSRs, into their own state laws.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By adopting these rules, the state gives their state troopers and local commercial vehicle enforcement officers the authority to enforce federal regulations on intrastate companies.
That is a massive moment. So the federal government isn't necessarily reaching directly into your Ohio dump truck company.
No, they don't have to.
The state of Ohio is enforcing the federal rule book because they agreed to it to get highway funding.
Exactly. FMCSA guidance explicitly includes drivers operating CDL-required CMVs in both interstate and interstate commerce.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Interstate travel across a border is absolutely not required to trigger these drug and alcohol testing rules. Staying local does not make you immune.
Okay, so if that local excavating company assumes they are exempt and the DOT conducts a new entrant audit or just a routine compliance review, what actually happens?
Oh, it is a bloodbath. Totally. If you have been operating CDL-required vehicles in commerce without a drug and alcohol testing program, you are racking up acute violations.
And those pile up fast.
Very fast. The auditor will cite you for failing to implement a random testing program, failing to conduct pre-employment tests, failing to educate your supervisors.
Ouch.
And that leads to severe financial penalties. It completely tanks your safety rating.
And the insurance companies see that.
Oh, they do. And when your safety rating tanks, your insurance provider will either exponentially raise your premiums or just drop you entirely.
You literally become uninsurable because you didn't understand the legal definition of intrastate applicability.
Yes, your business is effectively dead.
So for anyone listening right now, managing a local delivery fleet, maybe a regional construction company or a waste management service, you must audit your operations today.
Do not wait.
Look at your vehicles. Do they require a CDL to operate? If yes, your state borders are not some magical force field. You are in the system.
You are. And you need a compliant program immediately.
Okay, but let's push that boundary even further. We've established that the local dump truck is covered.
Right.
But what if the person driving that truck isn't officially a truck driver on paper?
Oh, okay.
What if it's the head mechanic taking it for a post-repair test drive or that HR director from my opening scenario?
This is the trap of the job title fallacy. The core regulatory principle you must absorb here is that applicability is based entirely on the driving function.
Function, not title.
Not the job title at all. It doesn't matter what your payroll status is, and it honestly doesn't matter if the work is full-time or part-time.
Function over form.
Always. Covered drivers can be regular employees, they can be casual fill-ins, intermittent workers, leased drivers, or independent contractors.
So the FMCSA doesn't care about your org chart.
The FMCSA does not care how your Human Resources Department defines employment. They care about the physical act of a human operating a heavily regulated machine.
Think of a CDL like an active liability switch.
Oh, I like that.
Right. When the driver's license is just sitting in a wallet, it's inactive. But the moment that person puts the key in the ignition of a commercial motor vehicle and turns it, that liability switch flips.
It's instantly live.
It instantly connects that driver and the company they're driving for to the federal regulatory grid. It just does not matter if their business card says CEO, mechanic, or volunteer. The act of flipping the switch triggers the rules.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Let's look at another example from the regulatory guidance.
Okay, what do we have?
The backup driver. So let's say you have a mid-sized trucking company. They have a designated pool of full-time CDL drivers who are all perfectly enrolled in the random testing program.
So far, so good.
But the operations manager, who spends 99% of his time sitting at a desk looking at spreadsheets, he also happens to hold a CDL.
Naturally.
So twice a year, when a regular driver calls out sick, this manager grabs the keys and runs a route just to keep a major client happy.
And the executive team looks at their payroll and says, well, his title is operations manager. He's on the executive salary tier. He isn't officially in the driver pool, so we don't need to drug test him.
And that executive team is creating a massive liability. That manager is a covered driver.
Even for just twice a year.
The moment he operates that CDL-required vehicle in commerce, even if it's just for one afternoon a year, the company must consider him a covered driver.
Wow.
He needs a negative pre-employment test on file, he must be in the random testing pool, and he is fully subject to post-accident testing. Job titles do not insulate you from regulatory responsibilities.
I want to dig into the definition of in-commerce, though, because our sources bring up this really interesting example of an unpaid driver.
Yes, the volunteer trap.
Let's say a business owner needs a commercial truck moved from one facility to another facility across town. The owner's friend, who happens to have a CDL, offers to drive it across town as a favor.
Just a buddy helping out.
Right. He doesn't take a dime. It's completely uncompensated. As a manager, logic kind of dictates. No paycheck equals no employment.
Right.
Which means no DOT testing, right?
Right.
I mean, how can it be in commerce if money isn't changing hands with the driver?
It's a very common point of confusion because we just naturally associate commerce with a paycheck.
Right.
But you have to separate the driver's personal compensation from the vehicle's overarching purpose.
So the vehicle is the entity engaged in commerce.
Exactly. The truck itself is being moved to facilitate the commercial enterprise of the business.
It's moving business assets.
Yes. It is furthering the business's goals on a public roadway. The fact that the physical human steering the truck is volunteering their time out of the goodness of their heart, that does not remove the vehicle from the stream of commerce.
That is wild.
The FMCSA has addressed this specifically too. Occasional or completely uncompensated operation of a CMV still triggers Part 382 applicability for the entity controlling the vehicle.
Meaning, you cannot determine your drug and alcohol testing applicability by sitting in an air-conditioned office and reviewing a payroll spreadsheet.
Definitely not.
You literally have to physically look out the window into your yard and see exactly who is climbing into the cabs of your trucks. You have to audit the seat, not the spreadsheet.
I love that. Audit the seat. Because if a human being is turning the steering wheel of a CDL-required vehicle that is furthering your business operations, you must ask yourself, is this person fully compliant with Part 382?
And if they aren't?
If they aren't, the vehicle shouldn't move, period.
This intense focus on function over title, it applies not just to companies with complex HR departments, but all the way down to the absolute smallest operations in the industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to a really fascinating logistical puzzle. The one-truck owner-operator.
Yeah, this is where the regulations have to get a bit creative.
Because the core rule is that owner-operators are not exempt.
Right. A motor carrier does not need a fleet of 50 trucks and a dedicated safety department to fall under these rules.
Right.
A single owner operator with one tractor wears two hats simultaneously under the law.
How does that work?
They must comply with all the requirements that apply to an employer, and they must comply with all the requirements that apply to a driver.
So they are the boss and the employee at the exact same time.
Exactly.
But logistically, how does that work for something like random drug testing? I mean, the whole point of a random test is the element of surprise.
Right.
You can't exactly randomly test yourself. Hey, self, surprise, you need to go pee in a cup before you hit the road today.
Yeah, that doesn't really work.
It completely defeats the psychological deterrent of the program.
It does, which is exactly why the FMCSA strictly prohibits it. You cannot self-manage a random testing pool of one.
Okay, so what's the solution?
The regulations mandate that a sole owner-operator must participate in a consortium random testing pool that contains 2 or more covered employees.
Ah, so you have to join a larger group pool managed by a third party.
Exactly. You hire a consortium third-party administrator known in the industry as a CTPA.
CTPA, got it.
The CTPA takes your name and puts it into a massive digital hat alongside hundreds or even thousands of other drivers from other small companies.
Okay.
Then, the CTPA utilizes a scientifically valid method to draw names randomly throughout the year to hit the required federal percentages.
So, let's say John owns 1 truck.
Yeah.
He just assumes that because he has 0 employees, the random testing mandate just doesn't apply to him at all.
Well, John is going to fail his safety audit spectacularly.
Because he's not in consortium.
Right. John must be enrolled in a CTPA pool.
Uh-huh.
But, this reliance on outside entities, these service agents, it introduces another major pitfall for managers and owner-operators.
Which is?
The regulations expressly include service agents within the applicability language now.
Meaning you are outsourcing the collections, the laboratory analysis, the medical review officer duties. You pay a company to handle the complex administrative machinery.
You outsource the administrative functions, yes, but here is the critical legal distinction that costs companies thousands of dollars in fines.
Lay it on me.
You can never, ever outsource your ultimate liability for compliance.
Oh, wow. It's exactly like hiring a certified public accountant to do your corporate taxes.
That's a perfect comparison.
You hand over all your receipts, your payroll data, and your W-2s. The accountant does all the complex math and files a return for you.
Right.
But if that accountant makes a grievous error or claims some massive deduction that is totally illegal, the IRS does not audit the accountant.
Nope.
The IRS audits you. The accountant doesn't pay the penalty, you do, because you signed the return. The ultimate liability rests squarely on your shoulders, regardless of who did the paperwork.
That is the absolute perfect analogy for a CTPA. If your third-party administrator fails to conduct the random polls at the correct federal percentages,
Yeah.
or if they accidentally use a laboratory that isn't certified by the Department of Health and Human Services, the DOT auditor doesn't shrug and blame the third party.
They find the motor carrier.
They find the motor carrier. The violation goes on your permanent safety record.
You can't just throw up your hands and say, hey, I paid them to do it right.
Ignorance of what your service agent is doing is not a legal defense. Delegating the task does not delegate the responsibility. During an audit, if the CTPA made a mistake, the FMCSA will penalize the carrier.
The cascading effect of that is just terrifying. I mean, if you manage a small fleet utilizing a CTPA, or if you are an owner-operator, you cannot just sign a contract and forget about it.
You really can't.
You need to manage your service agents with the exact same scrutiny you manage your own drivers. You have to ask for documentation. You have to verify their random pull percentages. Trust, but aggressively verify.
Absolutely. Because it is your operating authority and literally your livelihood on the line.
Okay, so we've established that intrastate local fleets are covered. We know that unpaid friends doing a favor are covered. We know that the guy with just 1 truck is covered.
They're all in.
It feels like this net catches absolutely everything. Is anyone actually exempt from these rules?
Well, yes, there are exceptions, but navigating them is like walking through a regulatory minefield. Assumption is what gets managers blown up here.
Let's talk about those assumptions, because a lot of managers look at the general federal motor carrier safety regulations, specifically the exceptions found over in Part 390 for things like government operations or emergency relief.
Right.
And they assume those blanket exceptions apply to everything DOT related. They think,
Yeah.
we are exempt from Part 390, so clearly we don't have to do drug testing.
And that is a fatal assumption.
Seriously.
Yes. 49 CFR 382.103C explicitly and clearly states that general exceptions do not automatically carry over to the drug and alcohol testing rules.
Oh, wow. So it's totally separate.
Part 382 is its own fortress. It has its own highly specific, siloed list of exceptions found in paragraph D.
Okay.
If your specific operation is not listed in paragraph D, you are not exempt regardless of what other parts of the federal code say.
It's like medical prescriptions. You can't just take a pill that was prescribed to cure a headache, which in this case would be your Part 390 exemption, and assume it will magically heal a broken leg, which is your Part 382 drug testing requirement.
Exactly.
You have to use the exact right medicine for the exact specific diagnosis.
And you have to read the warning labels incredibly carefully. Let's walk through some of these specific exceptions because they are incredibly narrow and fact-dependent.
Okay, where do we start?
First, we have certain employees regulated by the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration.
So like transit bus drivers.
Potentially, yeah. If a driver performs only FTA-regulated safety-sensitive functions, like
Ah.
driving a city transit bus, they might fall entirely under the FTA's drug testing rules in Part 655, rather than the FMCSA's rules in Part 382.
So you have to identify the correct DOT agency first.
Exactly.
What about government employees? We mentioned them earlier. Let's look at the classic government CDL driver scenario.
Okay, let's do it.
Say a state highway department operates a fleet of heavy snowplows and dump trucks. Management says, we are a government entity, we work for the state, we are immune to federal motor carrier regulations.
And for the purposes of Part 382, that assumption is entirely incorrect.
Really? Just being the government doesn't save you.
Being on a government payroll is not a magic shield against drug and alcohol testing unless they qualify for a very specific, narrow exception buried inside 382.1 or 3D, like certain military personnel or specific state-waived emergency responders. Government CDL drivers operating in commerce are fully subject to federal drug testing.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about the one industry that always seems to have its own special rule book, agriculture.
Oh, farming.
Yeah, how do farmers fit into this?
Agriculture does have exceptions, but it is a highly conditional, very fragile exception.
Fragile. How so?
Paragraph D outlines an exception for drivers operating what are legally defined as covered farm vehicles. It generally involves a vehicle controlled by a farmer, used for specific agricultural purposes, operating within a specified air-mile radius from the farm.
But just slapping a farm use license plate on the bumper of your heavy truck doesn't make you federally exempt?
Not at all. It is entirely dependent on the nature of the specific trip.
The trip itself.
Yes, let's look at an example. A farmer is operating a heavy truck, transporting his own grain from his own field to a local silo, and he is doing it within the qualifying mileage radius.
Okay, standard farm stuff.
Under the strict definitions, he is likely exempt from Part 382 for that specific agricultural operation.
He's operating inside the bubble of the exemption.
Right. But let's say the next day, a neighboring construction business asks him, hey, you have a big truck. Can you haul a load of commercial gravel for me across the state? I'll pay you well for it.
And the farmer agrees.
The bubble pops.
Instantly.
Instantly. The moment he begins using that exact same truck to haul unrelated commercial freight for compensation, the nature of the operation has fundamentally shifted.
He is no longer operating a covered farm vehicle for agricultural purposes.
The agricultural exemption vanishes. He is now operating a CMV in commerce, and he is instantly subject to Part 382.
Wait. So a manager or a fleet owner has to track regulatory applicability on a trip-by-trip basis.
They absolutely do.
If you have a mixed-use fleet, how are you supposed to keep track of a driver whose duties shift from exempt on Tuesday to non-exempt on Wednesday?
With extreme meticulous diligence, you have to evaluate exemptions based on exactly what the vehicle and the driver are doing on that specific dispatch.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, but you can never assume an exemption blankets an employee forever just because of the general nature of your overall business. If the physical operation changes, the regulatory applicability changes right along with it.
Okay, I want to throw one more wild scenario at you from our sources. What about people who don't even have a license yet?
The CDL student.
Yes. You run a truck driving school. You have 20 students who are just learning how to double clutch and back up a trailer in a closed lot. Are they covered by federal drug testing?
This is a beautiful example of how legal status and physical activity dictate applicability.
Okay, break it down.
It depends on where they are in the licensing process. If a student is just sitting in a classroom, or if they are driving in a closed lot but they have not yet obtained their commercial learner's permit, their CLP,
Right.
they are not subject to DOT testing. They don't meet the licensing requirement of the regulation.
They don't have the active liability switch yet.
Correct. But if that student driver goes to the DMV, passes the written test, and obtains their CLP, they now possess that switch.
So they're covered.
If they then take that vehicle out onto public roadways and operate it in commerce, for example, perhaps the school hauls actual freight to generate revenue during training,
Oh, I see.
then that student is fully covered. They must be tested.
So the takeaway for the listener here is pretty clear. Never assume an exemption applies just because we are a farm or we are the government or we are an educational institution.
Assumptions will sink you.
You have to analyze compliance at the micro level. What is the driver doing right this second? What specific license do they hold? And does a specific paragraph in 382.103D explicitly allow them to skip testing for this exact trip?
And if you cannot confidently point to the specific line in the regulatory text that grants you the exemption, you must assume they are covered and get them into your testing pool immediately.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. Let's say you've done the grueling work. You've audited your intrastate drivers, you caught the HR manager who occasionally drives, you've verified your agricultural exemptions trip by trip.
You got your list.
You have definitively established exactly who is covered by Part 382. Now, you actually have to execute the testing.
Right, the actual tests.
And this is where managers get hit with a major curveball, because to execute the tests, you have to open a completely different part of the federal rulebook.
Yes, the ecosystem of compliance. As a manager, you cannot survive by only reading Part 382.
What else is there?
You must deeply understand the symbiotic relationship between 49 CFR Part 382 and 49 CFR Part 40.
Part 40.
They are separate regulations, but they work hand in glove. Do not confuse them, but realize you cannot implement one without the other.
Break down the division of labor between these two massive documents, because I think people get really lost in the numbers.
Think of it this way. Part 382, which we have been analyzing today, is the FMCSA-specific regulation.
Okay.
It is the who, what, and when of trucking compliance. It dictates who is covered, what specific conduct is prohibited, like the alcohol restrictions we talked about when testing is required, like pre-employment, random, or post-accident, and what your responsibilities are regarding the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse.
So Part 382 is the rule that tells me you must give John a random drug test today.
Exactly. But Part 40 is a DOT-wide regulation.
DOT, meaning beyond just trucking.
Yes, it applies to trucking, but it also applies to aviation, transit, and rail. Part 40 establishes exactly how the testing must be conducted.
Okay, the procedures.
Right. It dictates the strict procedures for specimen collection, how the laboratories must calibrate their testing equipment, the specific cutoff levels for drugs, the critical role of the medical review officers, and the step-by-step requirements for the return-to-duty process if a driver actually fails a test.
I look at it like a recipe book and a kitchen appliance manual.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Part 382 is your recipe. It tells you when it is time to cook dinner, and it tells you exactly what ingredients you are required to use to make a compliant meal. You must bake a cake today, and it must have flour and sugar.
Exactly.
But Part 40 is the kitchen appliance manual. It tells you exactly how to safely operate the oven, how the industrial blender works, and the precise temperature required to avoid burning the whole place down.
That is exactly how they interact. You cannot bake the cake if you only have the recipe but have no idea how to turn on the oven. And you certainly can't bake it if you only have the oven manual but no ingredients.
And tying this back to our earlier discussion about CTPAs, you can outsource the labor of baking the cake, but if the baker uses the wrong temperature because they ignored Part 40, your company takes the fall.
100%.
You might know who to test under Part 382, but if your service agents collect the urine incorrectly, or if the lab uses the wrong cutoff levels because they aren't strictly following Part 40, your entire testing program is legally invalid.
It's worse than invalid. An improperly conducted test can lead to massive civil litigation from the driver while simultaneously resulting in DOT fines for the motor carrier.
Double whammy.
Yeah, they are two halves of the same compliance coin. You enforce the who and when of Part 382 while relentlessly ensuring your vendors execute the how of Part 40.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. I mean, we've navigated the biological realities of THC, we've broken down the federal funding mechanisms that trap interstate local fleets, and we've deciphered the recipe book of the regulations.
It's a lot to process.
It is. Let's bring all these complex, intertwining concepts back to a simple, actionable framework for the fleet managers listening.
That's a great idea. If you are managing operations, you need a mental checklist to prevent these catastrophic audits. Every single time you assign a human being to operate a vehicle, you should mentally run through 6 golden questions based on everything we've unpacked today.
Let's do it. Question 1 is foundational. Is the vehicle actually being operated in commerce? Meaning, is it furthering a commercial enterprise on a public roadway, regardless of whether the driver is getting a paycheck for the trip?
Perfect. Question 2. Does the operation of that specific vehicle require a CDL or a CLP?
Okay, question 3 requires looking past the paperwork. Is the person driving it, and I mean physically sitting in the seat, turning the steering wheel, regardless of whether their HR title is CEO, mechanic, or backup manager, are they performing the function?
Question 4 focuses on the minefield. Does a highly specific, explicitly stated exception under 382.103 apply to this exact specific dispatch?
Question 5 forces accountability. If you truly believe an exception applies, can you physically point to the actual paragraph in the federal regulation to back up your conclusion to an auditor?
And question 6 brings the two rule books together. If they are covered, have all the Part 382 requirements and all the Part 40 procedural steps been totally successfully completed before they perform any safety-sensitive functions?
If you can navigate those 6 questions accurately every time a truck leaves your yard, you are going to avoid the vast majority of the compliance traps that destroy small businesses.
Without a doubt.
Which brings us to the overarching reality of this entire deep dive. Tradition is a trap.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You can never assume someone is exempt just because the company has always done it that way, because we've never had a problem before.
Tradition is not a valid legal defense in an FMCSA compliance review.
Definitely not.
Tradition, built on flawed assumptions, will cost you your operating authority. Or worse, it will cost someone their life if an impaired driver slips through the cracks of your administrative negligence.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent this entire hour analyzing the human physical act of driving. We've talked about human metabolisms, manual steering wheels, and the kinetic energy of the driver's decisions.
Right.
But as commercial vehicle technology rapidly advances, I'm talking about semi-autonomous driving features, advanced lane assist, all the way up to the horizon of highly automated driverless trucks. How is the legal definition of operating a CMV going to evolve?
Wow. It is the most fascinating philosophical and regulatory frontier in the industry right now, truly.
Right.
If a human driver is sitting in the cab, but they are primarily just monitoring a highly advanced autonomous system that is executing the actual physical driving maneuvers, will future iterations of Part 382 still view that human under the exact same lens of impairment?
That's the question.
Or will the regulations have to radically adapt to the reality of a computer doing the driving?
Right. If the truck is essentially driving itself for 400 miles on a straight interstate, is the human's Friday night beer or weekend THC gummy still the exact same level of acute safety risk?
It's a gray area coming up fast.
Obviously, right now, under the current law, the answer is an absolute yes. They are in the seat, they are fully covered.
No question.
But 5 or 10 years from now, the murky waters of compliance are going to get even deeper and more complex as the machine takes over the liability.
The underlying physics of an 80,000-pound truck moving at highway speeds won't change, but how the federal government regulates the interface between the human and the machine absolutely will.
Managers will have to stay incredibly vigilant to keep up with how the definition of driving changes.
Absolutely. The rulebook is never truly finished.
At the beginning of this deep dive, we talked about how a manager's assumptions can lead to a catastrophic audit. The regulatory landscape is full of hidden traps regarding interstate commerce, job titles, and biological metabolic timelines.
It's a lot to navigate.
But hopefully, after unpacking the exact mechanisms behind 382.101 and 103, we've given you a new framework.
I hope so.
One that values physical function over corporate titles, prioritizes federal supremacy over state assumptions, and understands that true compliance is about physical prevention, not just checking a box.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, always audit your seats instead of your spreadsheets, and stay safely informed on the road.